We all have favorites. Favorite ice cream, favorite kid. Kidding. Some of you do, it's okay. I know my mom did, and it wasn't me. Favorite TV show, right? We just finished The Bear, season 4 of The Bear last night. Oh my gosh, that show's amazing, right? We all have favorites. And let's be honest, we love when someone thinks like us, dresses like us, votes like us, and definitely we love when someone agrees with us. But what about when it comes to people, right? Because I think we've all got people that we admire, and if we're being honest, we all have people that we secretly look down on. And is that just what life is supposed to look like? Because if you've ever been overlooked or pushed aside, you know how much that stings. Jesus had a lot to say about that. Why? And what did he expect us to do differently? If you're taking notes, the title of our message for week 3 is Why We Rank People Wrong. Why we rank people wrong. I remember I was leading a student ministry at a church in Atlanta. We just launched a new campus, and so our campus was meeting in a high school, and so we needed a space for our middle school and high school students to gather on Wednesday night. Somebody at the church owned a restaurant, and they graciously opened up their restaurant for us to do our student ministry inside of a restaurant for a little bit, and then we outgrew the restaurant, and we needed a bigger space. And so I remember talking to my boss and saying, hey, we got to find another space or we're not going to be able to do Wednesdays. And he said, well, someone in the church has offered up the basement of their home. And I looked at my boss and I said, there's got to be a pretty big basement because we got like 200, 250 middle school and high school kids coming every Wednesday. And they said, yeah, he says they can fit. And I said, okay. He said, yeah, just go there Wednesday. They'll be ready to set it all up in the basement and you'll be good. So we pull up on Wednesday to get ready, and we drive through this gated neighborhood, and we pull up to the house, and man, it was big. It was a big house. And then we walked down to the basement, and it was a massive basement. I looked at the basement, and I was like, oh, yeah, we could fit about 600 kids down here. Now, the other thought I had was whoever owns this house, who comes to our church, who I had not met yet, is brave. And maybe they've never seen what we do on Wednesday nights because they just invited 200 middle school and high school kids into their home. And so we're setting up, and I see this guy standing off to the side, and he has this really nice tailored suit on, and he's just kind of watching us set up everything. And I immediately kind of gravitate towards him because I'm assuming this has to be his home. Like, he is dressed way nicer than the rest of us, and he definitely looks like someone who might be naive to opening their home to 200 middle school and high school students. And so I go over to him, and I start talking to him, and I'm saying, hey, like, thank you so much for opening up your home to us. Like, man, it really is going to make a difference for us to have the space that we can gather consistently for a little bit of space that we can grow into until our campus finishes its building, and it's such a blessing to us. And as I'm talking to him out of my up, he's moving stuff, he's sweating, and I'm thinking, I don't know who he is. And if he's one of our volunteers, I don't know him, and he definitely hasn't been background checked because I don't know him. And that's a problem. I appreciate all that he's doing, but this is not gonna be okay once kids show up. And so I'm doing this, and as I finish talking to the guy in the suit, he looks at me and he goes, oh, this isn't my house. And I said, oh, well, what do you do? And he says, oh, I just work at the front gate. I was just here to talk to the owner to figure out how we're going to let cars in to know whether or not they're a car that's supposed to be here to drop off a kid or pick up a kid. That's why I'm here. I'm waiting to talk to the owner. And I looked at him. I said, well, do you know the owner of the home? And he says, yeah, it's that guy over there who's on his knees setting stuff up in blue jeans and a white T-shirt, super unassuming. That's who owns the house. And in that moment, I think I did what many of us do. Because if we're honest, we are naturally drawn to the person who looks like they could do something for us more than the person who looks like they can't. And so I walk over full of guilt and shame, and I greet the person who owns the home, and I begin to talk to him, and some of you may know who he is. CEO of Delta Airlines, Ed Bastian, who opened up his home for 2 years to allow, at a certain point, 400 middle school and high school students to have a full-on service in his basement. Super unassuming, did not want anyone to know, did not expect anything from us. But he graciously opened up his home, and in that moment, I thought the guy who looked more impressive was the one who owned the home. And we don't mean to play favorites or kind of hold biases against anyone. We don't do it out of malice. It's just habit. I think culture teaches us to kind of start to kind of size people up fast. And if we're honest, again, we give more time and attention to those who might benefit us and less to those who don't. And sometimes it's status, sometimes it's style, sometimes it's confidence or shared interest. Either way, it sneaks in without us even realizing it. And often, unconsciously, here's what happens. If we're taking notes to write this down, we lean toward the people who can do something for us and lean away from the people who can't. Naturally, we lean towards the people who can do something for us, and we lean away from the people who can't. I wonder if you've ever walked into a room. Maybe it was a meeting, maybe it was a party, maybe it was even here at church on Sunday. And as soon as you walk in, you start immediately looking for your kind of people. The kind of people who look like you, the kind of people who are maybe dressed like you, the kind of people who maybe have the same hairstyle as you, right? It's automatic. We drift towards those who look like us, talk like us, or just feel familiar. We all do it. It's like this built-in ranking system that we don't even realize is working. And yet it shows up at church too, because here's what happens. We welcome the family that seems put together, but avoid the person who's seems like their life is a little bit messy. We want to sit next to the young couple with a cute baby, but we don't want to sit next to the older guy who's been sitting alone at church for the last 4 Sundays. Like, be honest. Let's be honest. 2 people walk into the church. One guy walks in with a latte, and he's dressed really nice. The other stumbles in late, unsure where to sit, and they look confused. Who gets your attention? Maybe a better question to think about is, who gets your kindness, right? This might have even played out in this room. Some of these chairs that you guys are sitting around, there's a label on it, a name tag. Some of you might be sitting on them. And there's some that no one chose to sit. And I wonder if we could be honest for a moment. If you were sitting near or walked through an aisle and you saw the name tag, did you think twice about even sitting in it simply because of how it was labeled? With things like failure, broken, useless, unworthy, unwanted. Did you think twice about sitting in that chair? See, favoritism even sneaks into the most sacred of spaces, and we cover it with, well, I'm just more comfortable with them. But comfort isn't always Christ-like. And sometimes comfort is just bias in disguise. We even do it online. We like posts from people who seem successful, whose lives look like ours, but when someone shares their struggles or they speak on hard issues, we scroll right past it, or maybe we even unfollow them because we don't want to see it anymore, and we hesitate. Here's something that's really dangerous. I think if we're honest, this same sort of bias and favoritism even creeps in when it comes to race and socioeconomic status. We maybe don't want to admit that that exists even in a place like the church, but it does, because here's what happens. We hesitate to confront injustice that doesn't affect us directly. Well, it's not happening to me, so why do I need to confront it? We show more grace to someone who shares our background and more suspicion towards those who don't. But here's what we have to remember. If you're taking notes, you can write this down. The gospel is not colorblind. It's compassionate, and God sees what we overlook. Better yet, God sees who we overlook. Proverbs 22, verse 2, it says this: the rich and poor have this in common. The Lord made them both. The rich and poor have this in common. The Lord made them both. Playing favorites isn't just bad manners. It's out of step with how God sees people. And if you've ever been overlooked, excluded, or dismissed, you know the sting. It doesn't just hurt. It feels almost dehumanizing, like you don't matter, and yet we all do it. Why? This is exactly why James chooses to call this out in his letter. Beginning of chapter 2, he does not hold anything back, right? And again, he's speaking to Christians, many of them who are poor, struggling in their own life, trying to make sense of how do I follow Jesus in a complicated world? And unfortunately, our world is still maybe as complicated, maybe more complicated than it was then. And so maybe we find ourselves asking the same question of how do I follow Jesus in the world that we live in today? They were asking that question then, and James calls out something they're doing and something we still do today. Look at what he says, James chapter 2, verse 1. He says, "My dear brothers and sisters, how can you claim to have faith in our glorious Lord Jesus Christ if you favor some people over others? How can you claim to follow Jesus, the one who touched the untouchable, the one who stood up for the overlooked and welcomed outsiders while still playing favorites?" Now, in the Roman world, favoritism was normal, right? Because wealth, status, and power, that's how you earned respect, right? You show up in gold rings and fancy clothes, you were seen, you were acknowledged. If you showed up poor, you were completely ignored and dismissed. But James is clear, that's not how it works with Jesus. And in God's economy, it's actually flipped upside down. Matthew 20, verse 16, it tells us that in God's economy, the last will be first and the first will be last. Look at what James says in verses 2 through 4. He gives us a scenario. He says this, for example, suppose someone comes into your meeting dressed in fancy clothes and expensive jewelry, and another comes in who is poor and dressed in dirty clothes. If you give special attention and a good seat to the rich person, but you say to the poor one, you can stand over there or else sit on the floor, well, doesn't this discrimination show that your judgments are guided by evil motives? I can feel the tension in the room. Because I've seen it play out. When we were in New York City, we were passing a church and a gentleman walked in and he didn't have a place to live at the time, but he wanted to come to church. And I remember him coming with his backpack and he's sitting on the front row. He comes and stands basically 2 seats next from me. And I had someone on our team come to me and they whispered in my ear and they said, "Hey, just so you know, security is ready." And I looked at this volunteer and I said, "What?" I said, "Oh yeah, we're watching him." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Oh, he looks like someone who might do something." And so you know what I did in that moment? Just to play with my volunteers, I went and sat right next to the guy. And I sat next to him the whole time. After the service, he walked around with me the whole lobby. I'm introducing him to people. But you see how this plays out. Just because of his appearance, we assume that, man, he doesn't need to be on the front row. He might be trying to do something. Why does he have that backpack? And we start to play this game purely based on his appearance. Now, we're not literally assigning seats like that today, but we're still making snap judgments like that, and we still give our attention to those who are well-spoken, not the awkward. We still scroll past the struggling friend, but we double tap the influencer's post. And favoritism might look different now, but it's just as real. And James doesn't just say, be nice to everyone. He calls it what it is. It's judgment driven by messed up motives. Look at what he says in verse 5. Listen to me, dear brothers and sisters. Hasn't God chosen the poor in this world to be rich in faith? Aren't they the ones who will inherit the kingdom he promised to those who love him? Now, this flips everything that we assume when it comes to value, because we tie value to wealth. We tie value to your job title. We tie value to your status or how you look. But James reminds us that God does not measure worth by what he sees. The one society overlooks, they might just have the deepest faith of all. 1 Samuel 16, verse 7 says it this way, but the Lord said to Samuel, don't judge by his appearance or height, praise God, for all the short people in the room. For I have rejected him. The Lord doesn't see things the way you see them. People judge by outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Now, what James is trying to give us isn't just ancient wisdom, it's a wake-up call. In verses 6 and 7, James basically says, why are you honoring the rich when they're the ones who actually exploit you? Right? Why are you trying to impress the very people that don't actually care about you or what you value? And then he ties it all together. Look at what he says, verses 8 and 9. He says this, yes, indeed, it is good when you obey the royal laws found in the scriptures. Love your neighbor as yourself. But if you favor some people over others, you are committing a sin. You are guilty of breaking the law. Now, this is heavy because he's saying favoritism isn't just unkind, it's sinful. It's not just a bad habit, but it's a heart issue that breaks God's command for us to love. And that puts us all on level ground because none of us have perfectly loved others the way we all want to be loved. And James finishes with this, verses 12 and 13. He says, so whatever you say or whatever you do, remember that you will be judged by the law that sets you free. There will be no mercy for those who have not shown mercy to others. But if you have been merciful, God will be merciful when he judges you. Bottom line, the way you treat people shows the kind of faith you really have. And one day, God won't ask who you impressed, but he will ask who you loved. God's not going to ask who you were in a meeting with. God's not going to ask who you had lunch with. God's going to ask, how well did you love them? How well did you serve them? How well did you care for them? See, favoritism is a big deal because it's the opposite of everything Jesus stood for. It cheapens love, it turns faith into a performance, and it silently tells the people around you they don't matter. And that's why James won't let it slide, and neither should we. If you're taking notes, you write this down. If our faith is real, it should show up in how we treat people who can't do anything for us. If our faith is real, it should show up in how we treat those who can't do anything for us. The question isn't if favoritism shows up in our lives, it's whether we're willing to see it and do something about it. And as always, Jesus shows us how. One night, Jesus is invited to a dinner and at the home of a Pharisee named Simon. And this wasn't just a meal, it was a cultural power play, because in that culture, in that context, having dinner, sitting at someone's table, it was this loud declaration that said, you belong here, that you are accepted here. And so Simon isn't just being polite, he's testing Jesus, watching his every move. And so the room is full of status, the room is full of pretense, the room is full of just kind of posturing. And then out of nowhere, someone walks in who definitely wasn't on the guest list. And we pick up the story, Luke 7:37-38. This is what it says. When a certain immoral woman from that city heard he was eating there, she brought a beautiful alabaster jar filled with expensive perfume. Then she knelt behind him at his feet, weeping. Her tears fell on his feet, and she wiped them off with her hair. Then she kept kissing his feet and putting perfume on them. Now, everyone knew this woman not by her name, but by her reputation. And we know this because she's just called an immoral woman in the Bible. Right? Maybe a prostitute, maybe someone that people whispered about behind closed doors in disgust. But she wasn't supposed to be there. And people like Simon, they would not even make eye contact with someone like her. But she walks in anyway. No words, just tears, and she kneels and she breaks open expensive perfume, which was probably her savings, her story, her shame, and she pours it on Jesus' feet without hesitation. And I need us to just imagine this for just a moment, right? Like, I don't know if you are a perfume connoisseur. I don't know if that's your thing. It's definitely not my thing. It's so expensive. Like, if you've ever heard of a fragrance store called Le Labo, I love it. Can't buy anything in there. I go in there and I get all the samples to take home so I can rub them on my arm later. Right? Now, it's expensive. Right? Now, this was a gift that someone gave me. I would never pay for this on my own. Right? We walked into the store because I was like, I want to see where it came from. And then I asked the guy, I was like, hey, how much is this? Then he told me, And I said, oh my gosh, I'm never using it. I need to savor it. But this is what this woman does. She takes a bottle of really expensive perfume, just like this one, and without hesitation, she's like, man, like Jesus, I'm not spraying this just to let y'all know. gotta save this, okay? But I would say that she took the spray thing off and she just began to pour it all on his feet. She just began to pour it out because she was so moved by the person of Jesus. And I think she understood that as soon as she walks into the room, she immediately probably feels the eyes on her of people thinking, what are you doing here? And I imagine her locking eyes with Jesus. And rather than eyes of judgment, there's almost this joy that's in Jesus' eyes, as if he could not be more excited to see her. And here's what I love about this story. If you're taking notes, you can write this down. The world remembers your labels. Jesus responds to your love. The room sees your failures. Jesus sees your faith. And in that moment, Jesus responded to this woman's love for him. He responded to her faith. And look at what verse 39 says. It says, when the Pharisee Simon, who had invited Jesus, saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would know what kind of woman is touching him. She's a sinner. Now, Simon is not just judging the woman, he's actually judging Jesus now. And so let that sink in for just a moment. That in the different spaces and places where you are, and someone walks into the room who maybe isn't supposed to be there, or you think they're not supposed to be there, and you make a snap judgment, could I dare to maybe say for you to consider thinking about the fact that when you judge them, you're not just judging them, but you're judging Jesus. Why? Because every person is made in the image of God. And that's what's happening with Simon. He's not just judging the woman, he's judging Jesus. He says, if this guy is really from God, he know better than to let someone like her touch him. See, Simon's whole mindset is about protecting his status, his appearance, and control. But Jesus, he's not threatened by the woman's past. He's moved by her heart. Look at what verses 40 through 43 say. It says, then Jesus answered his thoughts. Simon, he said to the Pharisee, I have something to say to you. Go ahead, teacher, Simon replied. Then Jesus told him the story. A man loaned money to two people, 500 pieces of silver to one and 50 pieces to the other, but neither of them could repay him. So he kindly forgave them both, canceling their debts. Who do you suppose loved him more after that? Simon answered, I suppose the one for whom he canceled the larger debt. That's right, Jesus said. Now, Jesus isn't just trying to call out Simon's pride. He's trying to change his whole mindset when it comes to love and status. See, Simon thought that needing less forgiveness made him better. But Jesus says it's the woman's awareness of her need for grace and a forgiveness that actually makes her more grateful towards others, and it makes her more loving towards others. Look what verse 44 to 46, it says this. Then he turned to the woman and said to Simon, look at this woman kneeling here. When I entered your home, you didn't offer me water to wash the dust from my feet, but she has washed them with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You didn't greet me with a kiss, but from the time I first came in, she has not stopped kissing my feet. You neglected the courtesy of olive oil to anoint my head, but she has anointed my feet with rare perfume. In other words, Simon, you followed all the rules. 48, it says this, I tell you, her sins, and they are many, have been forgiven. So she has shown me much love. But a person who is forgiven little shows only little love. Then Jesus said to the woman, your sins are forgiven. Just sit with that for a moment. The religious expert is getting corrected. The scandalized woman who's probably got the worst reputation, who knows that she doesn't belong in the room, Jesus is actually choosing to affirm her. And the whole room goes silent. Now, here's what this looks like. If you are in a seat, you can look behind you on your chair really quick, and there's a label on the back of your seat. Anybody sitting in a chair with a label on the back of your seat? Now, here's what I need you to do. I want you to stand up for just a moment. And what is on the back of your chair? Weak. Right? This is the label that the world gives to you, right? This is maybe even the label that you've given to yourself based on your story, right? But here's the beautiful thing. When we could take a step and understand that what Jesus calls us to is to recognize that, man, when we show up in all of our brokenness, in all of our flaws, just like this woman, when we just break into the room because we know, man, I got to get to the feet of Jesus because I know how much he loves me, how much he sees me. See, when I walked into the room, all the other people started looking at me like I didn't belong here, but Jesus was standing there with open arms. And you know what Jesus said? He said, no, you're actually not weak, but you're loved. And that's how I see you. And when you bring me your heart and you bring me your faith, you start to then believe that about yourself, and not only yourself, but you start to then see other people the very way that I am choosing to see you, that you are not weak, but you are loved. This is what happens. What's on the back of your seat? Broken. And he says, how you walked into the room and everybody else might be looking at you like, oh my gosh, why is she here? She shouldn't be at church. She doesn't belong here because of how broken her life is. But you bring Jesus, your heart and your faith, and he says, no, you're actually accepted. This is what happens when we do what this woman does, and she offered her heart, and she offered Jesus some worship, and Jesus begins to give her a new story. He begins to change the story and the narrative of her life and how she sees herself. Now, here's what I love is I guarantee you this woman leaves knowing that her sins have been forgiven. And here's what's going to happen. She's going to start to see other people that maybe have a story similar to hers. And I guarantee you, she's not even looking at Simon and being upset with how Simon has treated her because she knows how Jesus sees her. And Jesus says, your sins are forgiven. I guarantee you, she walks around to everybody else. And man, can I tell you, it's probably so easy for her to forgive others because she recognizes how much she's been forgiven. That it's probably really easy for her to love those around her, value them, accept them, bring them in, let them know that they are healed because she's experienced all those things through Jesus. And when you've really experienced it, oh man, it is so easy to see and treat people the same way based on what you have experienced. See, here's what I love. See, verses 49 and 50, the men at the table and among themselves, this is what it says, who is this man that he goes around forgiving sins? And Jesus said to the woman, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. Now, this wrecks everything that we assume about value. Let's be real. We like being around people who look good. We love being around those who are polished and likable, the powerful, but Jesus didn't play that game. He didn't climb social ladders. He actually tore them down. See, Simon wanted to be seen with Jesus, but the woman wanted to be changed by him. Simon left impressed, but the woman, she left transformed. And that's the choice in front of us if we're serious about our faith. And here's the truth that Jesus lived and one we're called to embody in life hack number 3. Take notes, you can write this down. You're defined by who you serve, not who you're seen with. In God's economy, you are defined by who you serve, not who you're seen with. Now, I don't think any of us came into this room this morning thinking, man, I know I'm such a judgmental person. I wake up looking ready and eager to judge those around me. I don't think we think like that. But slowly, quietly, favoritism sneaks in. It's not just in who we admire, but it's in who we avoid. And we see someone, and without even thinking, we decide too awkward, too messy, too different, too much work. And sure, it's easy to feel convicted at a moment like this. But what do we actually do with that? I just want to get very practical really quick, and we'll bring this to an end today. If you're taking notes, you can write this down. If I want to live like Jesus, I have to learn to see like Jesus. If I want to live like Jesus, I got to learn to see like Jesus. Start there. Who have you been overlooking at work, in your friend group, your neighborhood, even at church? Who are you avoiding? Right? Because they don't fit your mold. They don't challenge. Maybe they challenge your comfort, or they don't offer you anything in return, right? It's not about shaming yourself, but it's about retraining yourself to see. Who do you pass by without even noticing? And what if that's where loving the way that Jesus has loved us began? Romans 2:11 makes it pretty clear that this is not optional. This is what it says, for God does not show favoritism. Pretty clear. And so this whole idea of Christian nationalism in our country could not be further from the gospel. I don't care how you vote or who you voted for, the idea of Christian nationalism does not make sense. Because God does not show favoritism. And if we're going to follow him, neither should we. And so here's our homework this week as we bring this to a close. Find one person in your sphere this week who's often overlooked and treat them like a VIP. Not because it's your job, not because you're better, but because they matter, because God sees them and God loves them.
South Hills Church, I just want to take a moment and say thank you for watching our service online. Whether you're watching it for the first time or you're watching it again because you enjoyed the service so much from the weekend, I'd like to take a moment and dive into our giving. Every week we give people the opportunity to give back and give to the local church so that God can continue to bless your lives and bless your finances. Here at South Hills, we believe that everything comes from God. We believe that he's the one that chose us and brought us into this world, gave us our gifts and talents and abilities. And I just want you to know that when we give, we are giving back what God has already given to us. If you've ever seen any of our envelopes at a South Hills campus, you'll see on there that it says, every week at South Hills, your generosity is giving people the opportunity to live a better story. And there's a scripture on there in Matthew chapter 6, verse 21 that says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So I want to encourage you today to click down below and set up your giving, whether it's for the first time or whether you're doing reoccurring giving. We have 4 ways to give here at South Hills. 1, you can do it in person at any of our campuses through an envelope. Or 2, you can actually text any amount that you would like to 84321. And the 3rd way is to download our Church Center app. I encourage you to do this one because the Church Center app gives you opportunity to stay connected with our church and your campuses. It's a great tool and resource for you to know what's going on. And the 4th way to give is to give online. You can go to southhills.org/give and you can set up your giving there. Whether you're a guest of our church or whether you are a member of our church, or whether you simply just like to watch our services, I encourage you to trust God with your finances so that he can bless and anoint your finances and you can be trusting God in this journey of living life to the fullest. I love you and thank you for watching our online service today.